That's not it.
Or why not release it? Just release all the duplicative stuff. In the half you did.
Or your loved ones actually have met with the Department of Justice and provided testimony and evidence? None. And of those of you who have not met, which is everyone, how many of you have reached out either individually or through a lawyer or representative to offer to provide testimony and evidence? All of them. And of those of you, all of you who have reached out, how many of you were denied or ignored by the Department of Justice? All of them. And despite the shameful and despicable efforts by Ms. Bondi and her department to intimidate you, how many of you are still willing to speak to the Department of Justice? All of them. Well, Ms. Bondi, it looks like you have some more witnesses to talk to.
Gentlemen, time has expired. You're siding with the perpetrators and you're ignoring the victims. That will be your legacy unless you act quickly to change course. You're running a massive Epstein cover-up right out of the Department of Justice. You've been ordered by subpoena and by Congress to turn over 6 million documents, photographs, and videos in the Epstein files, but you've turned over only 3 million. You say you're not turning over the other 3 million because they're somehow duplicative, but we know that there are actual memos of victim statements in there. And you also took down the Department of Justice's prosecution memo from 2019. So it's clearly not all duplicative, but even if it were, why not release it? Just release all the duplicative stuff. In the half you did produce, you redacted the names of abusers, enablers, accomplices, and co-conspirators, apparently to spare them embarrassment and disgrace, which is the exact opposite of what the law ordered you to do. Even worse, you shockingly failed to redact many of the victims' names, which is what you were ordered to do by Congress. Some of the victims had come forward publicly, but many had not. Many had kept their torment private, even from family and friends, but you published their names, their identities. You can let her filibuster all day long, but not on our watch. Not on our time. No way. And I told you about that, Attorney General, before you started.
You don't tell me.
Yeah, I did tell you because we saw what you did in the Senate.
You're a lawyer. You're not even a lawyer.
Committee will be in order.
Time, and I should get back at least 45 seconds.
We will give you a few more seconds. I said that already.
45 seconds.
Okay.
We are currently the laughing stock of the world, partially because of the failed leadership within the DOJ, as we see kings and queens falling everywhere around the world. But we don't know the basics of right and wrong in this country because it's not about partisanship. And that's why I applaud Thomas Massie, because he's the only person on the Republican side that has a backbone and knows how to stand up to corruption. But nevertheless, let me keep going. My Democratic colleagues have been attacked this entire committee hearing. They have been lied on. And frankly, the American people weren't looking for that. They were looking for answers about the corruption that they see coming from this administration. In fact, this administration is complicit. But there are numerous others, like how the DOJ is attempting to obstruct justice in the investigation of the rogue agents who have murdered American citizens, or how the DOJ seized voter data from Fulton County in an attempt to steal the 2026 midterm elections, or how federal agents have Tom Homan on tape accepting a bribe and your agency killed the investigation, or how your agency is ready to give the president a $230 million payday, which is unconstitutional. The Constitution is clear. The president shall not receive any payment except his salary while in office. The fact of the matter is that you will be remembered as one of the worst attorney generals in history.
You made it here after hiding for 4 months from this committee. I understand why you're hiding from us.
Chairman?
You're one of the worst attorney generals in our history and an instrument of Donald Trump's lawless authoritarian agenda. And I'm glad the American people are seeing who you are, how you act, and the lack of good values. You weaponize the Department of Justice to target immigrants, working families, and anyone that Trump deems an enemy of the state, all to protect real powerful criminals, including in your administration. My Democratic colleagues have focused on your cover-up of the Epstein files and your passion for protecting pedophiles and child traffickers. That alone is grounds for impeachment. But there's so much more to your corrupt tenure as Attorney General. Attorney General Bondi, glad you.
Unmute yourself, Dallas. Good morning and welcome to Black Press USA's morning show, where we bring you the headlines and the culture. And I think the biggest headline coming out of yesterday was that committee hearing in Pam Bondi. Welcome, Dallas FOWLER, to Black Press USA.
Greetings and good morning. It's an honor to be here with you. Pleasure.
Right. So let me tell you a little bit about our co-host this morning, family. She's a former Los Angeles commissioner, a longtime political consultant, and she's also a contributing writer for Pursuit Magazine, a Black-owned publication headquartered in Toledo, Ohio. It is a swing state, of course. So Dallas, yesterday, the heat was on Capitol Hill.
It was hot. Well, it was hot for one individual. It was hot for the Attorney General.
For sure, for sure. I mean, that so many clips came out of the hearing from various individuals. We didn't get to them all, but Ted Lieu had something very instrumental to say. And I don't know, Greer, if we can cue up that video that you shared with me last week from when Ted Lieu said some very damaging things about Donald Trump. I think that clip is important to play too, because he actually questioned Pam Bondi yesterday about those allegations about Donald Trump and underage children. But what were some of your takeaways from yesterday, Dallas?
Well, I love the interaction that my Congress member, Sidney Kamlager, Dove, had with Pam Bondi, just in terms of highlighting not only the victims, but the information that has been redacted and taken off of the Department of Justice's website in terms of the data and the statistical information that shows there are far more white attacks, domestic terrorist attacks from right-wing Republicans than there are anyone from the left wing. And that's critical information when they continue to purport these lies and these half-truths. And of course, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett laid it out for everybody. She did not require any responses from AG Pam Bondi because we had heard enough of her. And she had proven even to Congressman Ted Lieu that she had no intentions of telling the truth. And at that point, I felt like she should have been held in contempt because we all could clearly see from these files, redacted or not, that there is plenty of evidence to show that the president has been engaging in this sex trafficking ring.
I think Greer has the clip queued, so let's take a look at what Ted Lieu had to say from last week.
Republicans so interested in Bill and Hillary Clinton is because they're trying to distract from the fact that Donald Trump is in the Epstein files thousands and thousands of times. In those files, there's highly disturbing allegations of Donald Trump raping children, of Donald Trump threatening to kill children. So I encourage your press to go look at these allegations. And I'm highly disturbed that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche just got the law wrong. Yesterday, he said essentially that it is not a crime to party with Jeffrey Epstein. Well, that's actually not correct. If Jeffrey Epstein was human trafficking minors for these sex parties, and you show up and patronize the establishment at that party, yes, you're guilty because patronizing is part of the law, of the federal sex trafficking law. So Deputy General Todd Blanche just got that wrong, which maybe explains why they aren't investigating all these folks, including Donald Trump. He needs to read the law and investigate these people. He also needs to resign, not only for not knowing the law, but a massive, not only screw up, but the biggest privacy violation in history. They release a lot of pictures of minors unredacted, just violated the privacy of these girls. It is uncalled for what they did. The one thing that they could not do under this law was to invade the privacy of these women now who were girls at the time who were victims of sex trafficking. Also,
just gross negligence on and shame on Pam. She was saying shame to the members of Congress, but shame on her. You know, she wouldn't turn around and look at the victims, never acknowledge them. And then, you know, just echoing what Ted Lieu said, the congressman member out of California, that they released photos of the young women. And nobody is talking about that the files say that Donald Trump raped young women.
Well, beyond that, the elephant in the room for me was Pam Bondi herself, as she is pictured in those images in the Epstein files, as a young girl or woman that was far too young to be engaging with the likes of those individuals at that age. So I think that was one of the questions that I was kind of hoping to be posed herself, just to see what her potential response may have been. But at this point, it is clear that this administration has no will whatsoever to actually do the work to prosecute these victims and represent the rest of the United States of America, where we are all clearly, no partisan involved, want to know and get to the bottom of this. And now that all of the files have been released, how do we move forward when we have monarchies, princes, queens, princes, all being held accountable around the world, and here we sit in the United States, still having to be at square one conversations in terms of how to move investigations forward and move prosecution forward.
Right. There's no accountability for the Trump administration. Another Congress member questioned her about having somebody within her department that's in the Epstein files. And so what we're beginning to find out is there are a lot of people within the administration that are in these files. And there is going to be, how do you get accountability from a lawless administration? I mean, that is the question, because that's the question. How do you get accountability?
That is the question. But even when you kind of think about it a little further, why has Donald Trump been allowed to continue to go on with 34 felony counts? And why was he able to, all of the things that have led up to the way our Supreme Court is set up right now, and how he's been able to get over. It is white supremacy. That is the basis of our and the founding of our country. And that has been able to permeate for years. I think America is tired. I do believe the next generation, from Generation X and forward, are not tolerating this. And I think you're going to see more people responding and doing the work. But the best thing that's happening right now is the Republicans are losing their majority in the House. And because of a recent Congress member retiring out of North Florida, we are now there. The Republicans are going to drop to 217 members.
But here's the question: how long will it take for DeSantis to call a special election, or is he going to tease it out? Because he could call a special election immediately, right? And we can get that. See who's going to take that seat.
It would behoove them to call the special election. They won't be moving anything policy-wise until that happens. So I think there'll be a lot more pressure on him from the White House to do so.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to point out. But it's just like so, and I think we might not see Bondi accountability, but it's important. I've always said, even though it seems like we have no power, these types of hearings and conversations for the American people to see how they're actually operating, putting them on the stand to answer questions. I think that a lot of American people are concerned after yesterday's testimony, because the lack of just empathy she had for those women behind her. And I think it's also it's a few men. I think it's also interesting to see that she was a victim just like them, but how she handled being a victim. Where she doesn't want any accountability. She just wants to be still with the guy. So
I served on a number of commissions in my time in the city of Los Angeles, but one of those commissions outside of public safety was the Commission on the Status of Women. We partnered with Homeland Security, and we worked on the human trafficking campaign. I did a lot of work around child sex trafficking. And so the Stockholm Syndrome is real, and we're seeing that now. And you see that where you have repeat offenders in trafficking, and they start initially as survivors. And we try to take a victims-based approach and make sure that we understand the psychology of what happens when you are repetitive and put in this process. And there's a lot of brainwashing that goes on. And I believe that AG Bondi is brainwashed. And
she definitely looks like brainwashed.
Right.
She was like, they were, she said, have you seen the Dow? The Dow is down by, we're at 51%. I was like, girl. And they were laughing at her like, nobody asked you anything about that.
We didn't ask about the economy, but if you want to talk about the economy, the stock market has crashed twice since the president has been in office. Since his first year in office, the stock market has crashed twice. And that's both markets, the crypto markets, the Dow, it doesn't matter. So how do you explain that, AG Bondi? That wasn't even the question at all. And then back to my rep, Conlager, when she asked her all of her questioning, her response was about Culver City and how Culver City is a part of her district. Well, just for everyone who is not in the Los Angeles area, Culver City does not have a crime problem. Crime is down there as well. So there was no need for her to be asked.
Yeah, but I think that's the ignorance of her, because when our Congress member Sidney Kamlager was talking about put the data back up about white supremacy, she referred to Culver City, but that just shows you how uninformed they are. Because if she really wanted to stick it to Sydney and talk about, if you're talking about crime, I hate to say it, but, say the Crenshaw district or Leimert Park, or, go for the jugular. But for you to go for Culver City, it's like, girl, you don't even know her district because you're picking your voters. You're calling your voters.
Right. So clearly, and even in South Central, even the South Central part of Sydney's district, the crime is down. So her whole agenda clearly, and by her staff, was with these prepared cue cards that she had on every member so she could have some type of irrelevant comeback that had absolutely nothing to do with the topic at hand, which of course, I won't say the ranking member, but it's not the ranking member, it's the majority member leader of that particular committee is allowing her to do that. But he
found it quite comical. He found it, and the thing is, he was laughing at her too, like giggling. He thought it was cute what was happening. But you brought up white supremacy, and I think that pedophilia goes along with white supremacy. Taking advantage of women goes along with white supremacy. So it's not just, hate crimes, it's gross crimes too. And it's all connected to white men in power. That's what it's summing up to look like.
It's coming around to the preservation of white supremacy. I mean, that is all this is boiled down to at the end of it. But when we really look further, I know that there are a lot of people that are watching this and saying, well, what do we do? How do we get out of this? And of course, it's always showing up to the polls, and be ready, get your community ready. But then it's going to have to go further. We have to it's going to be time for people to march and be at that Capitol and be in front of that White House to say enough is enough. And see, what I know a lot of Black people have been like, hey, we voted in 2024. Good luck to the rest of y'all. We're sitting this out. But to those folks that are at home, there are still some things that we can do to share and help other people that are out doing this critical work. So if you're going to stay at home, send a few dollars to the organizations and the candidates that are doing the work to get this out. But we're just in a very special predicament in our country. At the 250 year, you see the crumbling of this institution, which it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be where we are. And I just see that if you want to really incite this change, it's going to take not just only the Black press, but it's also going to take Black people and Black bodies raising their voices.
That's right. And so I think this is a good way to tease our first guest is in. But before we get to it, the chat is chiming in, Dallas. Oh. Let's get some of these comments. David Youngblood is saying good morning. Miss Sexy is saying good morning from Maryland. And then we have Babes492 is saying, why are Black people still having faith in either party? They both have lied to us for decades. Airfo is saying Pam wouldn't apologize. Orange G is saying as long as Bondi says Trump is the best president that the U.S. has ever had, she isn't going anywhere. She doesn't care about victims or survivors. David Youngblood is saying all of them will have to answer long after Trump is gone. And so the chat is chatting, but you were talking about elections and the important...
I do see one question in here about us being from Los Angeles and why isn't the LAPD investigating the murder of Keith Porter? Can your local DA or state AG charge as killer? That is an excellent question, and I just want to quickly answer that. And thank you, who asked it. Orange 96. Thank you for asking that. I just want to come back and say, if you can see, I've got an image here of Keith Porter behind me. I attended the press conference with Ben Crump and Melina Abdullah and Najee Ali.
That was at KBLA Tavis Smiley's radio station, right?
No, I think it was at no, this was at Second Call in
got it. Okay.
But we had that event, and the press conference was to call on the Attorney General here, Rob Bonta, to investigate. They are moving it up the chain since there seems to be a lack of engagement from our police here, as well as the Los Angeles District Attorney. So the question has reached the Attorney General's desk, and I do believe that the Attorney General that we have will do the work to investigate this.
Well, that depends on who you ask, but depends on who you ask. And to your point, we've had Dr. Melina Abdullah on several times, and they're at the commissioners meeting, LAPD meeting every week, asking that same question. So to ask the question, what are we doing? Black Lives Matter Grassroots is there every week. The press conference last week. So the people are pursuing justice when justice is moving slow here in LA. That's for sure. We have another comment. I see you have the figurine of Tim Walsh. You must be into stealing.
Darling, that is Bernie Sanders. I was a delegate for Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020 to the Democratic National Convention. That is not Tim Walsh.
But we got love for Walls, okay? Let's be clear too.
Yeah, all right.
He all right. Oh, she all right. She might agree. Yeah. All right. Let's bring in, since we're talking politics and elections, let's bring in our first guest. He's a former state senator of California, and he's also running for insurance commissioner here in California. Let's welcome Stephen Bradford.
Good morning, ladies. How are you guys doing?
Good. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Let's get straight to it. You recently shifted your campaign from lieutenant governor to insurance commissioner. With California facing a massive crisis where insurers are fleeing the state and rates are skyrocketing for Black homeowners, why is this office the right battlefield for right now?
Well, just what you stated, they need a warrior here. And I was recruited to do this. As you stated, 8 months ago, I was a candidate for lieutenant governor. But over the last 2.5 years, people were coming to me saying, Steve, at this time, we think your skill set is better utilized as insurance commissioner. And I was honest in saying, why would I want to do that? It's the toughest job in the state of California, and all you're going to do is get criticized. And it says, but we need someone like you who's been pragmatic, who's had an open door policy for 26 years as an elected official, who has a record of bringing people together. And after a whole lot of talk, a whole lot of prayer on my part, 8 months ago, I decided I would move forward with this. I'm honored that people feel that I have the discipline and the track record to be able to do this. Labor has supported me. Many of our big city mayors have asked me to do this and have supported me. Even some of my colleagues in the legislature have also asked me to do it. But most importantly, everyday working people have asked me to get involved in this race and run for insurance commissioner. And they know I'll show up and work hard like I've done for the last 26 years. So I'm entering this with my eyes wide open, but after understanding that we're at a critical time when you talk about insurance, but not just insurance. Many businesses are leaving California, and we need to start looking ourselves in the mirror and asking, why are they leaving the largest economy, fourth largest economy, I should say, in the world at this time? And it has to do a lot with some of the policies that we have already put in place.
And I'll be the first to admit that I was one of those people saying, hey, what's going on with insurance commissioner? Steve, this looks good. You should get over there. And he kind of at first was like,
I was, I like I said, I've been elected for 26 years, and I was running for lieutenant governors really as a homage to my mentor, Mervyn Dimley, who had introduced me to this work. Again, when I was in college, I met him my senior year. I was a biology major with every intention of being a doctor. And this was not in my future as I saw it. But he encouraged me not to run for office, but get involved in my community. So here I am doing that, and this is the work. I'm doing it for the work. It's never been about Steve Bradford. It's been about the work. So you need somebody who's going to show up and do the work. So I'm excited about the opportunity to do so.
David Youngblood says, Stephen is my former colleague. Good morning. So David Youngblood is giving you a good morning, Steve.
Good morning, David.
Greetings, David. All right, I got the next question here. So the last session of your term in the legislature, your landmark SB 1050, which was compensating for stolen land, you had a couple of reparations bills that came forward, as well as SB 1403, creating the Freedmen Affairs Agency, which both ultimately were vetoed, and one was vetoed and one was pulled by the Congressional Black Caucus, Legislative Black Caucus in California. And how do we keep the momentum? I know there's been another bill that was put forward that was fairly similar, and it did pass. But what's your take on some of the bills that have come forward in the last session, and how do we keep the momentum for moving these bills forward?
Well, as the old saying, you should strike when the iron's hot. We were in perfect position a year and a half ago to deliver what the folks of California, as well as the nation, thought was needed for reparations. As you stated, 1050 was my bill dealing with the racially motivated taking of property from African Americans, as I was able to return that property to the Bruce family that was stolen in 1924 in Manhattan Beach. And that bill would have done created similar opportunities to return property from African Americans, not just African Americans, because it was race neutral, of people who have had their property stolen. Last year, my former district director and now assemblyperson, Tina McKenna, did the bill herself. She reintroduced it again. And again, the governor vetoed it. I was disappointed for that, but so be it. 1403, which was the Freedmen Affairs Agency, or whatever you want to call it. I served 2 years on the Reparations Task Force. And one of the things I was clear in those 2 years is that if it's not in the budget, it doesn't exist. I was able to get $12 million for reparations, even though that's a drop in the bucket, but it was a starting point. And if you didn't have some interagency, because we have a Native American Affairs, we have a Asian American and Native American Affairs Agency, I said we needed a Freedmen's Affair or some kind of registry in order to do that. My bill didn't move, 1403 didn't move, because I didn't take the governor's amendments, because the governor's amendments turned it into really a study. It turned it over to the CSUs, which I truly support, but we'd already done that work. So it didn't create the real agency that we needed. And
so the study that he was requesting was the lineage study. Has that already been done? Did I miss that?
No, it hasn't. I mean, but lineage, as you had some of the people who testified during the reparations task force hearings, as well as those bills that move forward, is done by genealogists. And we had a bunch of Black genealogists already on board. Even at Cal State universities, you're going to need genealogists to do this work. And even without that, I also had a working agreement and understanding with the Mormon community. They have some of the best documentation on genealogy and lineage and history in this country. And they were already on board to assist. They helped me do my family tree and trace my family roots 4 years ago. So we were recreating the wheel, and you're still going to require a genealogist to do the work. And that's what the registry would have done. But anyway, they chose to go in another direction. So it's water under the bridge for the most part.
But I think that what you've done, though, has sparked conversations across this country, which is important. And I want to get your take on two things. So first, Santa Monica recently said that they are tackling reparations and the beach house there. I want to get your thoughts on that form of reparations. What's your thoughts on that? And then Evanston has issued $25K in reparations payments to 44 residents And those residents are part of an ongoing reparations program. So when you look at what you were just talking about and you see what's happening in Santa Monica and in Evanston, is this what reparations is all about?
Well, I've always stated during my 2 years on the task force, reparations was never about a check. It was about land. That's what was promised 160 years ago to those former slaves, 40 acres and a mule. So I always stress that it should be about land. But I said, if it wasn't going to be about land, it should mirror what the GI Bill provided: continued education, ongoing health care, first-time home buyers assistance, on and on, things like that, tax breaks for starting small businesses. I says, that's what reparations should look like. I had colleagues, I was part of the National Black Caucus of state legislators. All of my bills were endorsed as model legislation. As you stated, not only California was watching, the nation was watching. New York, Senator Sanders, he has implemented and introduced similar legislation. Now they're doing their own task force and study in New York right now. In Illinois, they did the same thing. In Oklahoma, they were all following California 2 years ago. And they were of the mindset, if California can't get it done, how do we think we're going to get it done in some of these more direct racist states during slavery, who truly embraced slavery, whereas California said they weren't a slave state, only a name only. We did everything else a slave state did. If you came here as a slave, you were treated as a slave. If you were a runaway slave, we had a Fugitive Slave Act. But those states was watching California, and they were just as much disappointed when my 3 bills didn't move as many folks here in California. Yes, we had a movement going on, and we still have to pick up the baton and continue. Like I say, Senator James Sanders in New York is continuing on right now with their study and trying to define what reparations look like. But Evanston, what they're doing in providing checks, I commend them. But I say that the minimum check, if it's going to be about money, should be $370,000, because that's the wealth gap between Black families and white Americans. So that should be the floor. Not
Wait, let me write that down. You said 370,000. That's the floor. Okay.
Yes, that's the floor.
Chad, did y'all get that? Write that number down. So when you go to your reparations hearings in your community, you know what your base is.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dallas.
Yeah, I love what's happening in Evanston, Illinois. I think in California, as expensive and as high as we're dealing with, and the Black flight that we're dealing with, Black erasure happening within the Los Angeles County and other parts of California, like San Francisco and the Oakland area, Alameda County. We know that this has to have finance and a fiscal compensation has to be included in that. And when we talk about land, I look up in California every year. It seems like the governor is giving land to an indigenous tribe here. And when I look at those people, they do not look like the people in the history books that are being given these lands. So the legislature does what it wants to do, and they find the money and the resources for what they want to do. I look forward to engaging a broader conversation with our legislative Black Caucus here in California, with the Congressional Black Caucus. But I think the Congressional Black Caucus has a much bigger battle to fight right now before we can really talk about reparations. But in California, where the issue is moving, there have been about 14 bills that were introduced. Many of them have passed in a number of ways. So I do want people to know that the momentum is still there. There's still something happening. It's not always exactly how we want it or we see it, but I do believe that we are building up to that. I look forward to a discussion with our controller, our state treasurer, and let's talk about what the savings. I mean, if 12 million was rolled over, some may be for the study, so we can get our exact list. How did Evanston, Illinois get to the number of 44 precise individuals? How do we in California get to our precise number of who is going to be eligible to receive reparations?
I want to chime in a minute, Dallas, because we have a question and I want Steve Bradford to address. Well, Dale family says California never had slaves. What's your response to that, Steve?
That's someone who doesn't know history. California did have slaves. Matter of fact, the first governor of the state of California owned slaves. California was a slave state. We were just free in name only, but again, we adhered to every practice that a slave state had. And like I say, if you were brought here as a slave, you were treated as such. If you were a pregnant woman and gave birth, your child was born a slave in California. They weren't born as a free person. So we were very much a slave state in practice, in deed, in action. Maybe not in name, but definitely we did everything that a slave state did. And you mentioned earlier about Santa Monica too. Silas White was the property owner who owned property where the Viceroy Hotel sits today. He was going to start the Ebony Health Club for African Americans. And again, that city came in with eminent domain in 1959 and said, oh, we need that property for a parking lot. As you well know, there's no parking lot there. Yes, I commend the city now for moving forward, and Councilman Barry Sneed, who's on that council, and letting his voice be heard. And they're going to compensate the family, I think, $300,000 for their loss, but it should be well more than that. But at least that's a start, and I commend.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like there's at least 70,000 short for the base, right? It should be
well, when you talk about the wealth gap, but yeah. And we saw what happened down in Palm Springs and with Project 14, and I commend Ariva, who had me involved with that as well, and understanding what happened there too. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of stories that we experienced in California. Like I say, Bruce's Beach, the Bruce family. I authored the bill in 2020 to return that property to the family. We did that very successfully, but it's hundreds of stories like that, not only in California, but thousands across this country.
What happened with the Bruce family? Did they end up selling that land back to the county?
Yes, they did. And let me explain why. They sold in real estate, we know it's two things: location, 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 but it's also zoning. And that property is zoned open space. It was no way the city of Manhattan Beach, who didn't want to return the property in the first place, was going to rezone that for either residential to match what was on both sides of that property, $1 million condos, or for commercial, which was across the street, restaurants and bars and things of that nature. They weren't going to do that. And without having that property rezoned, it had absolutely no value to the family other than open space. The only people that it had value to was the county of Los Angeles, where they had their lifeguard training facility there. So I would have wished they would have held on to the property a little longer, because they were getting close to $500,000 in rent. And so I would have milked that for 4 or 5 years before selling it. But yes, they sold it because, they realized that the city of Manhattan Beach wasn't going to rezone it. So it really had no real commercial use or long-time value other than what was being offered at that time.
We're going to jump into a couple more topics. And Steve, since you're here, can you stick around and go through a couple stories with us?
Yes. Okay.
All right, so let's jump into this next story. The CBC is forming a new coalition with civil rights groups to fight Jim Crow 2.0 policies. Now, the National Pan-Hellenic Council and several national civil rights organizations joined the Congressional Black Caucus yesterday for a press conference at the Capitol to address the impact of Trump administration's policies and rhetoric on Black Americans, and to highlight how Black leadership is working collectively to respond. Take a look at what the president of the NAACP
Chairwoman Clark said. For putting this together. At NAACP, we stand in solidarity with all of the organizations here today. 100 years of Black history. History is something that we should learn from, not repeat. 100 years ago, we witnessed the decline of this country through our stock market crash in 1929, the erosion of civil rights, no protections, regulatory industries causing harm in our food, our water, our air. And here we are 100 years later, about to repeat that same problem. For the NAACP, it's important for us to stand with Black institutions, because we all know collectively we would never suppress our identity for political expediency or anyone else's comfort. In this moment in our democracy, Black folks are the most democratic citizens of this country. And so we stand here to advocate for a constitution that affords equal protection under the law. We stand here advocating to ensure that all Americans are provided a fair wage for their work. We stand here to ensure that the democracy survive an administration that is seeking to attack it. So thank you to the CBC. Thank you to all the partners for making sure this moment is recognized. Black history is American history. So let's celebrate American history through the lens of Black people. Peace and thank you.
Okay. Of course, that was Derrick Johnson, national president of the NAACP, and later House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and Congressional Black Caucus Chair Yvette Clarke spoke as they held this press conference and convened of course, the sororities and fraternities of Black organizations. I know, Steve, you're a member of Phi Beta Sigma, correct? Oh, there it is. All right. So, Dallas, I'll start with you. What's your response of the CBC addressing Jim Crow 2.0 policies and how they're planning to move forward?
I think it's the most important, pivotal thing that we could be doing right now, particularly with the state of the Congress and how we're kind of just battling it out right now for control. And when you look at voting rights, I mean, these voter laws that they're trying to implement, which will make it very difficult for women to vote. Anyone who's ever been married, anyone who doesn't have readily accessible their birth certificate and all of those things, it is unconscionable the direction that we are going in this country. And the caucus has to do everything possible to lay out the case for why this is unfair. But I do believe most people in this country don't like unfairness, whether they vote or not.
Right. And Steve, I think you are the perfect person because we know that all politics are local, and really states and local leadership is really what's holding the line, especially in blue states. But when we see what's happening and what they're saying from the CBC on a federal level, how do state legislators play into this, to this fighting Jim Crow 2.0? What is the role of a state legislature when we hear this type of conversation?
To be out front and be progressive and be, let their voices be heard. We have to do this in unison. We shouldn't be surprised what's happening in this country right now. What we see right now is who America has always been. America has always been a racist country who has always suppressed minorities. This current administration has just pulled the lid off and let our true colors shine. So we need to push back. I mean, this is just as critical today in 2026 than it was in the 50s and the 60s in the heart of the civil rights movement. And many people always think the civil rights movement was just about Black folks. No, the reason why Dr. King was assassinated because he understood the war on poverty included everybody, and bringing civil rights. We have women's rights today because of the civil rights movement. We have gay rights today because of the civil rights movement. Dr. King was appealing to everyone, and America wasn't ready for that. And they're still not ready for that today. And so I commend the Congressional Black Caucus, the NAACP, all of our civil rights organizations, the Pan-Atlantic Council for the work that they're doing. It's often been said there's stories that made America, and then it's stories that America has made up. This current administration wants to tell the stories that America has made up, because if you look at the stories that have made America, they're trying to erase that. This country was built on the backs of our indigenous people, our Black individuals, our Latinos, but they want to make it seem like white America did this all by themselves. That's the farthest thing from the truth. So we as local and state legislators, we also need to know this truth and tell the truth and let our voices be heard in a very collective and collaborative way.
Okay, so we're looking at the midterms coming up. We see the Trump administration taking voter files out of Fulton County. We hear conversations about Trump wanting to nationalize elections. We saw Steve Bannon saying that ICE or federal agents will be at polling places. And then yesterday, we see that the House passed the SAVE Act, which they're saying safeguards American voter eligibility. But we know that this is, going to be voter suppression. Now, while it's framed as a bill to prevent non-citizens from voting, its proof of citizenship requirements create a massive hidden hurdle for millions of legal Americans, and particularly women. Now, under this law, if a woman goes to register and her current ID, Jane Smith, doesn't match her birth certificate, Jane Doe, she could be required to provide a paper trail of marriage licenses or divorce decrees in person to prove her identity. And we know the list goes on, and it's all about the devil in the detail with this policy that they've just passed. When we look at the state of California, or we look at blue states, how can this passage, if it passes the Senate and everything, can this hurt, blue states or California?
I mean, it could hurt all of America, but what we're doing in California is pushing back against this, crazy administration's going on right now. This is as regressive as it's been, I should say. When you talk about proof, California and America as a whole runs the safest, fairest elections in the world. It's no doubt about it. We do not have election fraud in this country. We're nowhere near that. So to even insinuate that you need an ID, we got past that in the 60s when you had, the education test, how many bubbles are in a bar of soap, all of those things that Black folks were subjected to in order to deny votes. This all they want to do is suppress the vote. If they suppress the vote, they continue to stay in office. But when educated people get out and vote, you see what happens in this country. As it's often said, bad people are elected when good folks don't vote. They're trying to make sure good folks don't vote so these bad folks can be elected. So no, California has been leading the way. I commend our Attorney General, my former colleague, Rob Bonta, for always ready to throw up a lawsuit against everything that this administration is doing that's regressive, that's oppressive, and it is straight out racist. But it's no fraud in America, especially no fraud in California when it comes to our elections.
Dallas.
I would just add, because while California native, I attended Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University. So I spent 4.5 years in Tallahassee, Florida, and where my very first national election vote was in 2000 in Florida. And if anybody can remember what happened in 2000, we had a presidential election, and it all came down to Florida that night. And it was very systematic how they went about ensuring that there were no polls on the HBCU campuses. There was very limited access. There are voter ID laws. I had a voter ID card. Okay. And I was actually turned away from my local poll there, that I voted right across the street from my apartment, and they turned me away. They said, "Girl, you got to go." It was a little old white lady and 2 6'5", 300-pound corn-fed white men that said, "Girl, go." And so I was turned away. I cried, I got in the car, I'm crying, why they won't let me vote. I called my mom, not knowing she was one of the founding members for California Election Protection. So she knew what to do. She said, "Go to the Capitol building. They can't turn you away there." So I was ultimately able to vote. But this is in 2000, not 1965. Mm-hmm. This is in 2000 that this happened. This is not that long ago.
Right.
So we know the links and the measures that they will go to ensure and getting those from 2005 in Florida, 2008 in Florida, even up to Barack Obama's election, we had Florida purging the rolls of voters, of Black voters who they expected to be able to turn out for this election, for that election. So we know it's going to be brought, but Black people have to do what we have always done. We know it's going to be hurdles. We always manage to work and organize. We are not outnumbered in this country. We are out organized. We know that, right? Who said that? Was that Malcolm X, Dr. King? One of them said that. Okay, so we have to do the work to ensure that We're getting our groups, our church organizations got to roll out. So I love that the NAACP, I love this whole consortium that the Congressional Black Caucus is trying to put together of organizations that are going to be doing this work and ensuring that we are getting our people to the polls. So yes. So
it's something. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
No, I was going to say, I was going to follow up with what Dallas was stating. James Clyburn has stated it so clear, and history proves it. It was always the Black church, the Black Greek organizations, and the Masonic organizations that were responsible for high voter turnout. They are being pushed to the side. We have to activate those groups again. Got to go back into churches. I mean, Adam Clayton Powell, the first Black congressman from New York, all he had to do was stand up in the pulpit of his church and say, I'm running. And the church handled everything. That has been our base, and we need to go back to that as well, because we've slowed down there.
Right.
And we have to find new bases too, because
but that's the foundation. Expand upon that, because our churches, our fraternities, and our Masonic organizations were out in the community, making sure that we knew who to vote for, when to vote, all those things. And it's not as progressive. I mean, when people talk about Blacks don't care about education, if you know the history of this country, there were more HBCUs at the beginning of the 20th century than any other university in this country. We always valued education, and look at those institutions today and all the folks that they've educated over the last 100 years. So no, it's the lies that they continue to tell.
Right. And it's something about papers. I was, just a week or two ago, Christine Omi was talking about make sure you have your papers. It's just something about this administration, and they want you to carry these papers around. Before I get to our poll, because that ties to our poll, but Mike V, Steve is asking, have any of your bills or legislative proposals been attacked by the administration or its movement yet, like PBI, predominantly Black institutions, for example?
Well, yes and no. I mean, as my last year in the legislature, I passed Black serving institutions. That allows colleges and universities to have an enrollment of 10%, a minimum of 10% or 1,500 African-American students to apply for this designation and be granted. I'm now on that board that reviews the applications of these colleges. And it's about identifying these colleges and universities that are welcoming and accepting to African Americans. Right now, they're afraid that they can't get funding for this program, even though we didn't ask for funding when we stood it up. Matter of fact, today was supposed to be a board meeting. It got canceled at the last minute. That's why I'm able to do this with you this morning. But organization and like that are concerned that going forward, as we build out BSIs, that we will need funding, and this current administration will not fund projects like that. Calling it DEI. It's diversity, inclusion, and equity is what this country should be about, and it's always been about. And I call it JEDI: justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. That's what we all need to be, is Jedi warriors. So yes, some of the legislation has been attacked from a standpoint of funding, but we still need to press ahead and making sure that it's implemented to the full extent.
And I just saw the University of California at Berkeley just recently became one of those Black serving institutions.
Nice.
Well, I don't know if they've been confirmed yet, but yeah, we have Cal State. You might be. I'm not saying I got my eyes on everything, but I know Dominguez Hills, Sac State, Compton College, even El Camino has applied for it. So we're excited about that. It was adopted by the National Black Caucus of State Legislatures as model legislation. Their first concern was, is a threat to HBCUs. I says, no, we're not trying to compete with HBCUs, but we got to understand there's a lot of young students or whoever who can't afford to go to a HBCU or don't want to go to college outside the state of California. So we want to give them that wraparound good feeling that you got, Dallas, when you went to a historically Black college. And if I had a redo in my life, I would have done that. My mother went to Prairie View, because the culture and awareness and education is far different at HBCU and our self-awareness than we do in any traditional university in this country.
So Dr. Maryland is saying, I agree. Church has always been a refuge. And to add to this, we need to go back to be discreet and stop showing our hand. Let's organize in private and strategize. Yeah, we need an underground railroad. So here's the poll. Chat, we want you to chime in, and Dallas and Steve, you can too. Since we're talking about it, if you had to prove your citizenship in person tomorrow to keep your voter registration, do you have your original birth certificate or marriage license? And are you ready to go? Yes, it's in the safe. B, no. I'd have to hunt for it. C, I'd have to pay to order a new one. Or D, this is just a poll text by another name. All right, chat, chime in, and we'll start with you, Dallas. Which one do you choose? Do you have your paperwork?
Well, I say D, all of the above, but I do have my papers.
You have your papers. How about you, Steve? How about you, Steve?
I agree. It's D. It's all it is masked as a poll tax and a way to deny folks who vote. But yeah, I have my birth certificate, but I don't know where it is, but it's somewhere in my house.
That's me. I don't know where it is. If the only thing I would have is my driver's license and my passport.
Well, we have Real ID now in California. I think a lot of other states implemented a Real ID program. So people, if you wanted to travel now at this point, everybody in California, for the most part, if you plan on getting on an airplane, you have your Real ID. And so I think that helps to cut out some of it. People have already had to do the work to look that information up. But when I think about my 82-year-old uncle who is bedridden in Sun Valley and depends on being able to vote by mail, if I put him in Texas, and I don't know where his birth certificate is, he was born in the 1940 or something like that. I don't know where his information is, in the process of having to go through all of that for a senior or somebody who served their community, who served and is retired and done the work. They deserve their right to vote. This is going to be a big question for folks. I even was concerned about my mom, who does not have her maiden name. I mean, her maiden name is on her driver's license, on her birth certificate. And so how do we come around? But she has a California Real ID. So I think if you have a Real ID in your state.
Somebody is saying in the chat, Co-Cider says Real ID isn't sufficient for Save America voter ID. So, and the chat is also saying, David Youngblood says, I'm ready and already standing in line. Mike V says, A, yes, it's in the safe. Dr. Marilyn said, yes, I'm ready. David Youngblood also says passport, driver's license, and birth certificate. Big Cheese says, yes, I have all the necessary papers. And so, yeah, so, but that's a good point that Co-Cider says Real ID isn't sufficient for the Save America voter ID.
But I like what somebody else said in the chat. They're saying that the SAVE Act is DOA, is dead on arrival.
What's the same person? It's the same person. Claudette Perry says, yes, I'm ready with it all. And so, but I think too, this is a generational thing because, the baby boomers, the Gen Xers, the latter part of the millennials, you expect those generations to have their paperwork. But when you look at, the younger end of millennials and you look at the Gen Zers, they might not even be thinking of all these things. And we know how dependent they are on their family. So, my mama got my birth certificate. So you think. So these are healthy conversations to have. Steve, I want to thank you for taking the time with us today to go beyond, just running for midterms and talk about national issues with us. And we'd love to have you back.
You have 30 seconds?
Yeah, we do.
I just want to share something. If I can go back to the insurance commissioner's race and shine a light on something that people are very unaware about the Department of Insurance. In 2000, the California passed legislation. There is now a slave era insurance registry for those insurance companies that insured slaves during the 1800s. They need to bring forth all of that documentation in order to help those former slaves or their ancestors with their genealogy, with any of the harm and helping stand up reparations. As your next insurance commissioner, I'm going to make sure that that agency within the Department of Insurance is stood up. Very few people know that existed. It's been there now for 25 years, but has got very little attention. So that's another tool that we can have, because insurance companies were just as guilty as our mortgage companies and our banking in redlining and denying individuals the right to own homes, and understanding again that all those slave ships were insured. And the majority of those large plantations had insurance on their slaves. And I said that reparations was not about checks, but know who did get checks after emancipation? Those slave owners who had their slaves insured. So they were paid. I want folks to know that registry exists.
David Youngblood says, bravo, Steve. Is that just California?
Yeah, we just passed that in California, like I say, but it was 25 years ago that we stood that up. Slave era registry of insurance. But insurance companies, if you do the history of all those insurance companies, many of them that were existing in the 1800s, they insured those slave ships.
Thank you.
Insured the slaves.
And the slaves as well. Exactly.
I mean, this is refreshing because as we look at all of the madness that the Trump administration is spreading across this country, the one thing I love about this show is that we talk to people who are actually still doing the work and show that hope is alive. And so, Steve, you just ended on a perfect note. Hope is alive because people, Black folks, are still in office on local and state levels. This is perfect example of why representation matters. So good luck to you, and we would love to have you back as we draw closer to Election Day.
Look forward to it. Thank you, ladies. Appreciate it.
All right.
Keep up the
Good
fight.
to you.
Peace and love. All right, just a few more headlines to get through. Urban One, which is one of the largest owned Black distributors of urban content radio stations, owned by one of my mentors, Kathy Hughes, has just launched its One Vote Representing the Vote, which is a multimedia campaign. And the initiative is designed to mobilize Black voters for the 2026 midterm, focusing on the power of the local ballot. Of course, we know that local radio is key and important, especially in urban and Black communities. And then as we look at what happened with the CBC and them pulling all of the historic organizations together, we kind of see this movement that's happening within our Black community of mobilizing voters on all levels. Dallas,
I love it.
you love it?
You know, as you are a big fan of, you are a really big fan of Kathy Hughes, but I am too.
She's my mentor. She,
Yes.
you know, she raised me in radio.
The work that you've done, and you are somebody that helped me. You and Felicia Morris, the poetess, are the people who helped me cut my teeth in radio and media. And so I think it is we have to organize on all levels, folks. You just heard the conversation that we just had with former Senator Bradford. We know that this is going to take the churches, our media, our radio, our grassroots organizations, all in consort. And we can't all let this play out on Instagram, okay? All this can't play out on TikTok, okay? At some point, we're going to have to get to the rooms where it's happening and do the work and roll our sleeves up. And that doesn't mean that we're out in the streets doing rah-rah protesting. For those who are tired of marching, there are places for you to still do some very critical work. Tapping into, especially if you're a journalist, and this time tapping into the work that's happening with Urban One, I think is going to be, it's going to be critical. So
yeah, it's critical. Urban One, which is radio, largest distributor of radio for Black America. You have the BLACKPRESS, which we are representing right now, which is 199 years old. And then, I mean, we don't really have any Black-owned networks. You know, I mean, think about it. We just talked about radio. We talk about print, but we don't have any Black-owned networks.
We put together all of these different things, a GoFundMe for everything. Where is the fund to buy back and control our media? How do we buy back? Because I believe truly, if Black people just decided everybody's gonna commit $50 a month, I believe in 5 months we could buy back a BET or a Viacom and be able to have some autonomy in our media. And I think that's the scary part for me now, is that we had that and now we've lost it. And so I think, but the best part of streaming is you have the griot, we have Black Press USA, and how we are able to tap in and make sure that we have stronger over the top programming that we can easily connect through to our devices.
So with that being said, please like and subscribe, Black Press USA. Follow us on all of your social platforms. That's Black Press USA on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. Support Black media. And because when you support the Black press, you're supporting over 200 Black-owned newspapers across the country. So when we talk about local connection, you have Urban One, these local radio stations, which a lot of Black people still listen to. You'd be surprised how many Black people or urban communities don't have apps. And radio is their form of listening pleasure. And so, yeah, please support us, Black Press USA. A couple more stories before we get out of here. One is from one of our affiliates with the Black Press, but this one right here is about what's happening this week and this weekend. The NBA All-Stars this weekend in Los Angeles. And Ludacris is set to headline on Saturday ahead of the dunk contest. Chloe Bailey will perform the Star Spangled Banner and lift every voice and sing at the NBA HBCU Classic, which is something new and that is growing and becoming more popular, which I think we're both excited about because you went to Florida A&M, I went to Grambling. And so to see these HBCUs represented on such a national level with the NBA, you see there's growth.
Oh yeah, I'm excited. A lot of folks coming in town. I think I think there are a number of events happening. The Legends, NBA Legends is having a kickoff with the Retired Players Association. And they're going to be in my council district in my neighborhood in Adams at the OK Player event. So you can go to the Retired Players Association. They are having an event in conjunction with my councilwoman Heather Hutt out of the 10th Council District.
Oh, that's your councilwoman too. Okay.
And she is the first Black woman to represent that district in the history of the city of Los Angeles. So I think it's great that she has found ways to tie them in. I never could imagine NBA All-Star. We've had a couple here in Los Angeles, but I could not imagine them having an event in community. That's a big deal. Also, the Jordan has a practice facility or some kind of
Crenshaw,
thing.
at Crenshaw, right?
And they're going to be taking over. Nike's taking over Crenshaw High School for the weekend. They're going to have all types of games and tournaments out there.
Complex is doing something at the Art District. So I mean, LA is about to be on fire this weekend. And hopefully, ICE isn't lurking in the background, and that's sad that you have to think about these things now. Like, should I have my papers?
At this point,
Christy Dobie said, make sure you have your papers
on you at all times. At this point in time in our society, that's where we are, unfortunately.
That's where we are. It's funny, but it's not funny. Last story of the day before we wrap up. Where are we at? Oh yeah, so this next story comes from Black Press USA affiliate, the Atlanta Voice. Now, the world's largest serial killer exhibit makes its U.S. debut in Atlanta. So the 27,000 square foot immersive experience takes guests through the minds of notorious killers such as Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, to lesser known killers such as Anthony Swole, known as the Cleveland Strangler, and Atlanta's Howard Belcher. Now, the stop in Atlanta marks the exhibition's U.S. debut, and it's the largest edition. The exhibit features 150 killers from America, Europe, and Russia. So if you're into serial killers, Atlanta has them for you.
Very interesting, Atlanta. That's an interesting way to document history. But the Atlanta child murders, I mean, there was a documentary on that. I was too young to understand what was happening when that was actually going on. But I think that's one of the few instances of like a Black serial killer that you hear about. So that'll be interesting to see. But I know what they're going to really exhibit, which is who the makeup of the typical serial killer is. And
Right. I know for me growing up, it was the Night Stalker. The Night Stalker was looming around out here, and I was like, "Whoa!"
Yeah,
it was so scary. Mike V says it's gonna be lit. So I guess some people in the Atlanta Voice, they knew what they were doing when they reported on this story, because some people find this interesting. It doesn't mean that you're a serial killer, but there's a lot, there's a lot of podcasts that talk about murders and, connections, and is this the next serial killer? So people find this fascinating and interesting to them. I know, what was the name, Dallas, of the strawberry killer from Figueroa? Remember? It was a Black man, and he was killing all the strawberries.
He was the Grim Reaper.
That's who it was, the Grim Reaper. That was another one out here.
He actually lived around the corner from my mother.
The Grim Reaper. He lived down the street from my grandmother. My grandmother's off of Broadway and, 101 of the 120th Street. So
he had a place off of Van Ness in 82nd something. He was like around here too. So people who knew him, a lot of people knew him. So it was one of those things.
There he is right there.
There he is.
Grim Reaper. Mm-hmm. And what about the one that was shooting people out his trunk, and he had his son?
DC Sniper.
The DC Sniper.
Malvo was the son. I can't recall but if you ever want to talk to the attorney who represented him, my good friend out of DC, he goes by Warrior Lawyer on social media.
Oh gosh.
He represented the DC Sniper. So there are
there he is.
Everybody deserves representation, no matter what. And he was the attorney that did that. So,
all right, but to read more about this this presentation that's happening in Atlanta, this exhibition, you can head over to the Atlanta Voice, which is a Black Press USA paper, to learn more if you want to check it out. Before we get out of here, we have some Black facts. And on today, February 12th, 1909, the NAACP was officially founded in New York. The founding 60 members of the NAACP were prominent white descendants of abolitionists and African Americans, including W.E.B. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells, and Mary Churchill Terrell. So today we remember and we celebrate the NAACP as we start at the top of the show, hearing words from the current president, Derrick Johnson, as this organization continues to fight for the liberation of Black folks.
I think they tried to play with Ida B. Wells a little bit on getting on that board as a founder.
They always play with Black women. We always, all our life, we had to fight.
And the fight continues.
All right, chat. We'll be back tomorrow. We have a real treat for you tomorrow. Al Reynolds will be here tomorrow, along with the designer that designed the Haiti uniforms for the U.S. Winter Olympics. Stella will be here along with Al Reynolds. And of course, Dallas will be back. So stick around as we continue to inform, inspire, and uplift Black culture right here at Black Press USA. Thanks, Dallas.
Thank you for having me.